Truly a great day in Birmingham. Mr. Secretary, we like to say it's great to have you here in Birmingham. On behalf of the city of Birmingham and all the residents of this community, as well as to our Congresswoman Terry Sewell, to other elected officials that are present this afternoon, which includes Councilor Darrell O'Quinn, who is chairman of the Transportation Committee, as well as State Representative Neil Rafferty and anyone else that I've missed. I want to welcome you here this afternoon. This conversation around reconnecting our communities. Birmingham is the perfect city to talk about the importance of transportation equity. Too often, communities of color have been cut out of transportation advancements. Those oversights mean residents are often or have often been denied opportunities for adequate health care, education, and employment. Simply put, when we deny our communities adequate transportation options, we stifle their growth and their ability to build wealth. That's why I am pleased to have the support of the Biden-Harris administration. We're very excited to have the Secretary of Transportation, Secretary Mayor Pete in town, which is making historic investments in our communities like ours in improving transportation networks. And thanks to the Reconnecting Communities program, the federal government will be stepping up with more support to improve our transportation infrastructure. Along with aid from the American Rescue Plan, Birmingham is becoming equipped to transform the lives of all of our citizens. Here's an example of how we connect our communities. When the 2059 interstate was designed and built in the early 1960s, it intentionally disconnected black residents in Druid Hills, Fountain Heights, and North Birmingham from the economic opportunity and activities in the heart of our city. Just a few years ago, this bridge was rebuilt at a cost of over $800 million, continuing that disconnection for at least another 30 years. However, this time, at the direction of the Office of Civil Rights of the United States Department of Civil Rights, City Walk was born. This 2-mile-long urban park that will open in the next few days will feature a variety of services that will be a connector for our entire community that positions City Walk as a bridge between opportunity and community. The goal of this administration is rooted in the spirit that has defined our city. That spirit is inclusion, making sure all of our residents have equal opportunity to thrive. But in order to foster inclusion in our city, we first have to embrace innovation. The Reconnecting Communities is a key component in that innovation, and we're excited about it. And thank you again to the Biden-Harris administration, to Secretary Pete and his entire team at the Department of Transportation for your commitment to our cities, as well as allowing us to create smoother paths for all of our residents.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bernard Simonton, and I'm president of the Alabama State Conference of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And on behalf of the men and women of the Alabama NAACP, who on a daily basis is fighting the struggle for equality, equity, and justice, we also want to thank the Biden administration and Secretary Buttigieg and his staff for highlighting and amplifying what's happening here in Birmingham, Alabama. We also want to thank Congresswoman Terry Sewell, who works tirelessly and oftentimes finds herself as the lone Alabamian working on issues, policies, and programs that are important to people of color in the state of Alabama and in her districts. Thanks to Mayor Woodfin for the work he is doing, like bringing the World Games to Alabama to ensure, to Birmingham, to ensure that we will have a place at the table in Alabama, in the state, in the nation, and in the world. Transportation is the key to things that we do, whether that is bus transportation or highways and streets that we walk and drive on a daily basis. And because of poor decisions that were made by transportation gurus in the past, people have been cut off from progress. But because of the biggest investment in public transit and the largest bipartisan infrastructure bill in U.S. history, this will open the doors and opportunities for so many in the future. Alabama has long needed infrastructure that connects communities instead of dividing communities. And because of this historical bipartisan legislation, long gone are the days where the working class have to suffer due to lack of commutes or simply being unable to even have a commute to a place of employment. And we know that Birmingham Express is a successful work in progress that began under the Obama administration. But imagine how far we would have been if this project had been continued. Imagine dedicated lanes that run east and west in Birmingham where people in emergency situations can get to their destination quickly in rapid time. Imagine citizens who will use these bus service that will utilize dedicated lanes to get to medical appointments and their jobs and to polling places. Yes, and to polling places so they can exercise their right to vote. This is groundbreaking and will be a place in the city of Birmingham on a level of epic proportions as it relates to transportation. The citizens of Birmingham should not be disenfranchised for not having access to reliable transportation. Let's show how much we care about the quality of life of our citizens, and let's showcase this historical moment so that others across this country will take notice. This historic bipartisan infrastructure is life-changing, but this is also an inflection point in our nation's history, and we pray that eyes are on Birmingham and the state of Alabama. And moving forward, it is our sincere hope that we are able to get more things done that will make a significant difference in lives of citizens in Birmingham, this state, and in the nation. The Alabama NAACP and its members salute the Honorable Mayor, Secretary Pete Buttigieg, as one of our older members often says, good job, well done.
Good afternoon. And what a glorious day to be in Birmingham and the community of Woodlawn, is it not?
Yes.
I am so excited to welcome to our wonderful city the 19th Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. I also would love all of you to know that he's had a chance to literally see our city. We started off at a ribbon cutting of the A.G. Gadsden Motel, which is about preserving the legacy, the very strong and proud legacy of Birmingham, of civil rights and voting rights. And we also had an opportunity to sit, and he heard from an array of stakeholders about the transit needs of our city. I want to thank our Birmingham Jefferson County Transit Authority for hosting us, and I want to thank all of the stakeholders, which really gave Secretary Pete an opportunity to really understand the lay of the land. You know, for me, it is an honor to finally work with an administration that got something done on infrastructure. I can't tell you how many times we've had infrastructure week, infrastructure month, infrastructure year, from administration to administration that I've been a part of. But finally, it was the Biden-Harris administration working with a bipartisan group of legislators, Republicans and Democrats. We finally got across the finish line a bipartisan infrastructure bill that has now been signed and will benefit the state of Alabama and this nation. When I think about the systemic disinvestments that we've had in our infrastructure, it was laid bare during this pandemic. And when we talked about infrastructure, it was important for voices like mine to be heard at the decision-making table. We wanted to make sure that infrastructure wasn't just about roads and bridges and transit, but it was also about broadband and water and wastewater and sewer, because all of those are infrastructure needs. So it gives me great honor to know that the state of Alabama will get lots of resources over the next 5 years, including $5.2 billion to fix our roads, $225 million for our bridges, $400 million to improve public transportation, $782 million for our water infrastructure, and yes, $100 million over the next 5 years to make sure we get broadband in every part of this state. For decades, highways, railroads, and other transportation networks have divided our communities rather than connecting them, making it harder for our most vulnerable residents to get to work, to get to school, and to access services that they so need. Here in Birmingham, we have seen firsthand how this long legacy of racial injustice that has actually been perpetrated and continued by systemic racism that actually is structural in nature. It is by no happenstance that our railroads and our byways actually block in communities of color and those in underserved communities. What I am so proud of today is that Secretary Pete will announce a new program that's a part of this amazing bipartisan infrastructure, a program called Reconnecting Communities. He's just had a chance to be on our rapid bus transit as we left downtown Birmingham, went through Avondale, and now ended up here in Woodlawn. I think you would agree, Secretary Pete, that we have a lot going on in this great city and in the communities that we represent. What we need are more resources and better opportunities. That's exactly what the bipartisan infrastructure bill will do, and that's exactly what your announcement today will be about. Thanks again for coming to this community, and with no further ado, I introduce to all of you the 19th Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. As many of you know, he was mayor of South Bend. He has done more in this limited time as Secretary of Transportation with his lens of being a mayor. He knows what's important about connecting communities, and we're so excited that he's making that announcement right here in Woodlawn and in Birmingham, Alabama. Without further ado, Pete Buttigieg, our Secretary of Transportation.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon. I want to thank Representative Sewell for her warm welcome and introduction, for her leadership, and for her support for this bipartisan infrastructure law. As she said, over $5 billion coming to this state alone for roads alone, hundreds of millions for public transportation, support for affordable internet, and so much more. And if I'm not mistaken, she is, I believe, the only voice from Alabama on Capitol Hill who was there with us and said yes and understood the importance of this legislation.
From Alabama, came from this district.
And has been just a fantastic partner to the Biden-Harris administration as we seek to get big things done. I want to thank Mayor Woodfin, who has been here with us throughout the day, somebody who I first got to know when we were both serving as mayors, has such a great reputation in the American community of mayors, and the job has only become more demanding and more important since I had it. Congratulations to you and the city of Birmingham on all the good things you have going on here. It's phenomenal. I want to thank Charlotte Shaw and the Transit Authority and all of the members of her fantastic team for hosting us, for showing us this terrific BRT project, and for what they do to connect people to opportunity. We're joined by Phil Gray, president of ATU Local, and we're so thankful for the frontline workers of our transit systems. I want to thank President Simulton of the NAACP for his words and his leadership. And I want to recognize my colleagues who are here as well. Deputy Administrator, Federal Highway Administration, Stephanie Pollock, Federal Transit Deputy Administrator, Veronica Vanderpool, and several other members of our team who are in from Washington, as well as those who work right here in the region. And I want to thank everybody who has worked day in, day out in ways visible and not to connect people to opportunity, which is what today's news is all about. This is as fitting a place as you can find in the country to talk about the history and about the future of transportation equity in America. As was mentioned, we had a great discussion earlier where I heard and learned about how neighborhoods from right here in Woodlawn, which is doing such remarkable work to move forward, to Titusville, to the community of Harris Homes and so many others, find themselves constrained by pieces of infrastructure that were put in without regard to the well-being of that community. And that's part of why I'm so thrilled about the news that we're going to make today. It's a major milestone that we have been working at throughout this administration. We're here to announce a first-of-its-kind initiative to help cities and towns not only address the consequences of past choices that live on to affect transportation today, but to deliver a transportation future that connects communities and helps residents get where they need to go. Traveling in the country, across the country in the year and a half since I was sworn in, I've seen wonderful examples of how infrastructure can transform communities for the better, like this Birmingham Express bus rapid transit project we're celebrating today, which will provide access to over 70,000 jobs. No small thing in a community this size. Saving people time and money, whether you take the bus or whether you drive on what will now be a less congested road. And I'm sure that my predecessor, Secretary Anthony Fox, and President Obama will be proud to see the funding that they awarded coming to life this summer. Congratulations again to the community on making this a reality. And we're supporting similar projects across the country, Arizona to Illinois to Nevada and more, that are going to make it possible for people to get where they need, because the evidence is clear. When people have access to opportunity through physical mobility, the result is more social and economic mobility and prosperity. But I've also seen firsthand everywhere in the country, from Syracuse to Richmond to Baltimore to, yes, here in Birmingham, how a piece of infrastructure that is supposed to connect people can sometimes have the opposite effect and cut people off from opportunity, sometimes dividing or even destroying whole neighborhoods or communities. The way I-65 was constructed, for example, here in the middle of the century, through the heart of Birmingham, displaced black neighborhoods and created physical barriers and dead zones that still keep people apart. Our national transportation system represents one of the great accomplishments in the history of this country. As the mayor noted earlier today, this city is here largely because of how railways joined. From the interstate system to our national aviation system, we have a lot to be proud of, but we can't ignore the basic truth that some of the planners and politicians behind those projects built them directly through the heart of vibrant, populated communities, sometimes in an effort to reinforce segregation, sometimes because the people there had less power to resist, and sometimes as part of a direct effort to replace or eliminate black neighborhoods. And while the burden is often greatest for communities of color, Americans today of every background are paying the price of these choices. A child born in the 2020s could face a greater risk of asthma because they are too close to the pollution from a highway that went right by their residence. Home and business owners may see their property values and revenues affected because they're cut off from customers or workforce. And some workers can't take advantage of a good-paying job opportunity because their commute would just be longer or more expensive than they could afford. Consciously or not, we're all conscious, or we're all aware, I should say, consciously or not, of how infrastructure can divide, because it is woven into our everyday language. Think about what it means that we have the expression, wrong side of the tracks. It means we have known this for a very long time. A decision made 100 years ago can have this effect today. But that's why today we're doing something about it. With funds from the bipartisan infrastructure law, we're working to build infrastructure that will serve people well for the next several generations. And we are proud to announce the launch of Reconnecting Communities, the first ever dedicated federal initiative to take places that were divided by past infrastructure choices and reconnect them for a better future that begins today. We're going to deliver about $1 billion over the next 5 years, and communities can start applying for that funding today. Sometimes that'll help move a project from a drafting table to shovels in the ground. Sometimes it'll help communities develop proposals that can then go on to get other sources of funding, like state dollars or our federal RAISE grants. In fact, we're already using funding like RAISE grants to help reconnect communities around America. In Atlanta, we're supporting the planning for a project that envisions putting a cap over part of I-75, I-85 that divides Midtown from the old Fourth Ward, and building pedestrian-friendly streets and parks on top of that cap. In St. Louis, we're helping build a public greenway which will mean better walking, biking, and other connections to transit between neighborhoods. In Baltimore, it's a bus rapid transit vision to connect the east and west parts of the city, much like what we are celebrating right here in Birmingham. But whatever the specific shape the project takes, what they all have in common is that they empower communities to innovate and define their future. They provide people with better connections to jobs and opportunities and allow residents of places that are today holding them back to enjoy a safer, healthier, thriving experience in their neighborhood. And today, for the first time, we have dedicated funding to support such projects across the country. Meanwhile, this work will happen while we are launching department-wide policies to make sure a fair share of jobs and contracts go to workers and businesses from the communities where the projects are happening, so that everyone can benefit. Far too often we hear from residents who say, finally, construction has come to my neighborhood, only to note that the people in the hard hats with those good paying jobs don't look like they came from anywhere near the neighborhood. We can change that, and we're acting to make sure that that generational wealth is created through these investments. Now, a lot of this work has bipartisan support. But I will say it's striking how much misunderstanding and resistance we sometimes see when we work on the issue of healing what was broken, reconnecting where there was division. So I want to be very clear. This is not an exercise in blame or guilt. It is a reckoning with simple realities and an insistence that the future will be better than the past. Recognizing where taxpayer dollars isolated people or caused damage and using new resources to fix it, that's not divisive. What's divisive is a highway or railway or interchange that is dividing people from where they need to be in their own community, and fixing it will make a whole community better off. That's why we're doing this work. There's nothing sacred about the status quo. These highways, roads, and railways are not rivers, lakes, or mountains. They are not divinely ordained. They are decisions. And we can make better decisions than what came before. Now, every piece of transportation infrastructure, even the very best, comes at a cost, not just financially, but in terms of disruption, which is why process matters, it's why fairness matters, and why communities need to be empowered to face these trade-offs. So, when we evaluate applications for this funding, we'll be looking for project sponsors to demonstrate strong community input and buy-in, and looking for projects that will improve life for everyone, with plans to serve the people who live in these communities already. And to help lift up those voices, we're launching soon a companion program called Thriving Communities to help community leaders ensure that local priorities, things like affordable housing, are embedded alongside infrastructure decisions. I can't wait to see all the project ideas that are going to come in and apply for this funding. Just imagine if instead of an overpass right by your house, there was a park where your kids could play with their friends on the weekend. Imagine if instead of having to drive a mile or more out of your way to get around a rail line, you could drive right over it, or even walk straight across a scenic greenway, similarly to what Birmingham did so successfully over a decade ago, transforming an unused rail viaduct which used to divide the city into a park that helps reconnect it. This is what reconnecting communities is all about. And this city and this state have so many powerful examples that we've seen of why this is important, and the deep relationship between transportation and justice that was on display once again this morning at the A.G. Gaston Motel. Good transportation policy connects everyone to where they need to go efficiently, affordably, and safely. And I believe that together we won't just be repairing legacies of the past, we will be creating a new one for the future that all of us can be proud of. So I'm delighted to make that announcement here in Birmingham and honored to embark on this journey alongside all of you. Thank you very much for joining today. Ben here can quarterback our Q&A if we got a little time for it.
Yes. Absolutely. That is to be determined. There are a lot of projects in the queue that need federal support and federal dollars. Under the leadership of James Fowler, who leads our local Department of Transportation, there are many things we have been doing to address reconnecting our communities. We started with And prior to our administration, shared with the secretary earlier, we started with Councilor O'Quinn and I sued the state of Alabama, the Department of Transportation, related to when they wanted to rebuild 2059 that bypassed through the city and cut through Druid Hills and Fountain Heights. That project you see under the interstate is an example of our attempt to reconnect our communities. There are so many other projects that are in the queue. What I need to do is get with our local team and see where those projects lie in priority, and then we will be applying for this. But we're very excited about this Reconnecting Communities grant and opportunity for the city of Birmingham.
You never know how many applications will come in until you open the process, which begins today. But I expect that we will learn a lot about just how many communities have examples where a piece of infrastructure has divided them, and believe that that learning experience will not just help us program the $1 billion that we have to work with over the next 5 years, but we very much hope it will also inform how other funding streams get used, and not just federal funding. This should be part of how states are thinking about how to use the dollars available to them, because we know when you fix it, it benefits everybody.
So I think that the question was what kinds of projects would benefit from this kind of funding. Well, I think that a prime example is the bus rapid transit, where we are connecting people to jobs and opportunities from downtown to Avondale, Woodlawn, all along the route. This is a great example of how federal government working with state and local partners can really make a difference in the lives of communities. I also hope that we will see more streetscape, more green space. I think that this administration has really told us that electric vehicle charging stations should be coming. And so there are ways that we can actually try to provide more equitable opportunities for all communities. One of the things that I like most about what Secretary Pete talked about is that we also have in that bill, some preferred funding, a small amount of it, but for underserved communities like Woodlawn and others in our district. So I think that this will not only benefit big cities like Birmingham, but small cities like Marion and Wetumpka and others that also have infrastructure needs. I think the bottom line is infrastructure should be purely bipartisan. It is about building the infrastructure we need today, but also creating jobs, right? It's a no-brainer. So that's why this Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which is what the law is called, is really about not only connecting communities, but also employing communities and providing economic development for those cities and communities where they reside.
Well, several things. First of all, Birmingham is a place that reminds us that there's always been a relationship between the physical ability to move about and basic questions of fairness and social mobility. Again, we were at the Gaston Motel earlier today, which is being turned into this wonderful nationally protected historic site. And so many travelers had to, as Dr. King himself noted in his letter from Birmingham jail, had to sleep in their cars because as black travelers they couldn't access an affordable and safe place, but the motel provided that. In addition to functioning ultimately as a command center for one of the signal moments in the civil rights movement, which of course included also things like the Montgomery bus boycott, which again reminds us of the relationship between the ability to move around efficiently and in a dignified way and what it means to be a truly equal citizen. You couple that with the work that's already been done here, the attention that has been paid to both the harms, as what the mayor described, and some of the other stories we've heard about with the railways that really constrain so many neighborhoods, but also not just the harms, the solutions that are being found, the benefits of something like this kind of bus connection, the intentionality that went into some of the viaduct work and other things. It's a great place that brings together the story of how we are not just acknowledging the past, but using that knowledge to create a better future. All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you.